Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, first off the top, have a great Memorial, I'll say, Day weekend, if that's not a contradiction in terms. Sports betting, it's coming our way. What does all that mean? We'll get to that in a few moments. But first, let's get our business panel, and we'll see post-election analysis and what's important to the business community. Let's do it.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Well, as often is the case, we have our business panel. Dave Taylor is sitting across from me. As often is the case, he's the president of the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association, and sitting next to him is Gene Barr. He's the president of the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry. We want to take just a few minutes. We've done a post-primary, but there's some issues that I think these folks want to talk about, and then we'll get to a couple of the big business issues. Gene Barr, I want to start with you.
Sure.
There was a couple of surprising things. I'm not just talking about the number of women that got, that, as you know, got nominated, particularly in the Democratic Party. Scott Wagner won the Republican gubernatorial primary. That was not unexpected. But there are a couple of other things that happened that didn't get tremendous publicity. What's your big takeaway?
Well, there were a number, and let's look at that again. I think that we certainly saw the results of the redistricting issue come out, where the Democrats are now poised to take a number of seats away from Republicans. Right. Congressional, you're right. We're certain to see, I shouldn't say more women, because there are none in Pennsylvania's congressional delegation. Yeah, right. A couple of other surprises. I think everyone knew Lieutenant Governor Mike Stack was in trouble. I think the fact that he finished so poorly surprised many people. John Fetterman is the individual from there. And the other thing that I think bears a lot of attention is the fact that for November we have 4 people who are either members of or allied with the Democrat Socialist of America. And in fact, the co-chair of the Pittsburgh chapter was quoted on election night saying, "We're turning Pennsylvania the right shade of red." I don't know that we ever would have thought we would have heard something along those lines, but certainly some major developments in Pennsylvania politics during the primary.
Yeah. Dave, is that just a question of sort of Democrats moving pretty far to the left, Republicans in some cases moving pretty far to the right? I mean, and they beat the 2 women who won their Democratic nomination, beat 2 cousins, the Costa cousins, right, who were in the state legislature. That, I think that came as a pretty big surprise, no?
Well, I mean, it's certainly a sign of major change that the Costas, under the leadership of State Senator Jay Costa, the Senate Democrat leader, that they're the Democrats' first family of Allegheny County. And to see both of them, both of those state representatives, long-serving state representatives from a prominent family, go down to defeat 2 far-left, identity politics, Bernie Sanders leftists, really is a sign of the ongoing change in Pennsylvania politics. Certainly the realignment continues, where in the special elections you saw a central Pennsylvania seat that was Republican, stayed Republican, but in the State House.
I'm sorry.
Up in, it was Tioga County. But in the other 2 State House special elections, one in Washington County, long held by the Democrats, that a Republican was elected. In Bucks County, a seat long held by the Republicans was taken over by the Democrats. So the realignment of Pennsylvania politics continues. But I do want to mention with the election of John Fetterman, the mayor of Braddock, that he is a far left liberal, that U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont came to Pennsylvania to campaign for him twice, and that Fetterman, I think, may overshadow Governor Wolf in more ways than one.
Yeah, well, Governor Wolf, I mean, I'm not being critical, I'm just stating a fact, is, Governor Wolf is staid, he's reserved. I mean, he's not given to out. You can disagree with him, but you can't find.
It's a real contrast between those 2.
That's a good way
Dave's
to put it.
right. I mean, as mayor, people don't really look at your ideology as mayor. They want to know, is the trash picked up? Are the streets plowed of snow? Is this taken care of? There's now going to be more focus on Mr. Fetterman's ideology, Mayor Fetterman's ideology. The other thing that I'd like to mention is I think there's something crucial and very interesting in terms of numbers. Dave mentioned the 2 seats that flipped. in the Pittsburgh area, that was a D+10 that the Republican took. In the Bucks County race, that was an R+10 that the Democrats took. Real differences, though, in terms of the primary vote for the individual versus the special election. So there's going to be probably a rematch, certainly, of that one in November. So,
well, right now, as we speak, it doesn't look like this big Democratic wave. The president's job performance is up a bit. What we call the generic ballot question, if the election were held today, would you vote for a Democrat for Congress or a Republican? That's now on average only 3. When we talked about this at the end of last year, it was 12.
And the right track,
12.
wrong track is very high for him. I was surprised.
Yeah. So, I mean, it doesn't look like the Democratic wave is as big as we might have thought. And look, we're 5 months away from the election. But here's the other question. Given the size of the Republican majorities in both the House and the Senate, I think it's 121 in the House and 34 in the Senate, and I'm independent, I'm not, it seems to me that even though Governor Wolf, and I'll put it this way, is probably more likely to win re-election and not, but the House and the Senate are likely to stay Republican.
I would think so. I mean, these are historically large majorities, and it would take a pretty significant upset for those to be even significantly eroded. And again, when you look at the way that that President Trump won Pennsylvania, and that Democrat areas like Erie and Wilkes-Barre and Bethlehem and Easton voted for him, I think that it reflects a real desire on the part of working people, of everyday Pennsylvanians who really want and need jobs, opportunity, and growth. And even, despite all the other distractions that the president brings, the fact that we see the economy on an upswing, that we see, collections by the Commonwealth increasing to the point where we can balance the budget.
And you think in the end that's going to be helpful to the Republicans?
I really think so, yes.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to run to a break. There are a couple of other questions I want to get to after the break, and maybe we'll get to the business issues that I know you want to talk about. We'll be back in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association and Partners for Public Education, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Well, Gene, you were chatting earlier about these endorsements by the Democratic Socialist of America endorsed a couple of Democrats, 3, I think, in total. You say 4, and they won, and that led, I think, the President pro tem of the Senate, Joe Scarnati, to suggest that maybe we ought to have open primaries. Gave a speech at the Press Club a week or so ago. And it wasn't clear totally what he makes, but I know both of you have had these discussions in the past. We have a closed primary. You're a Democrat. You got to vote. You can vote in the Democratic primary, not else. Republicans, similarly. What?
I think a lot of this is being driven by the fact that we're increasingly seeing polarization. I think there's a desire to try and yank people back more into the center to accomplish some things. And as we sat here and we've looked at this, a lot of the people who traditionally have functioned as people on the right and the left are increasingly leaving. At the national level, you see a Charlie Dent leave.
Right.
At the state level, we've seen some people who have tended to be more moderate, who have been forced out or marginalized. So I think Senator Scarnati's view, I believe, is the one that a lot of people are talking about. How do we, one, inject more people back in for more participation, but more importantly, how do we get those people who are willing to govern?
Yeah,
and I think that's what's driving it.
And David, do you think it also has to do with the fact that he's looking for balance, more moderates perhaps in the independents to come in and vote? It was unclear exactly how far he wanted to take that. We don't have, and there's no legislation yet.
I think it'll require a specific legislative proposal to be able to discern what the intentions are.
Yeah. But I mean, historically, party leaders, whether they're party leaders per se, like county chairs and state party officials, they say no, 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 because they can control their own.
Yes.
Well, I mean, there is an issue
extent.
of, freedom of conscience and freedom of association, saying that, the parties are supposed to stand for something. And if you open the decision-making process as to who your candidates are going to be to an electorate that's outside of the people who have shared interests, then that makes you vulnerable to all kinds of machinations and gaming. And I can see where that the respective leaders would prefer not to have that.
And then keep in mind, this is Pennsylvania. This is not going to happen anytime soon.
Yeah,
so
I was going to say, it seems like we still have pretty strong party leaders, and there's still a party structure in place, right? All right, I don't know if we're going to get to the business stuff, but we're going to say, I was stunned, 18% turnout of registered voters, David. I mean, absolutely stunned. I thought it would be between 25 and 30%. Did that surprise you?
I guess it did surprise and disappoint me, and again, just across the board, we need to have civic engagement. People need to choose to live life with their brains turned on. People need to know what they believe and why. People need to choose to be informed as to who their representatives are in Harrisburg and Washington, and who the candidates are for those seats, and what those people believe and what they want to do if entrusted with public office. It's very discouraging, and again, I think it speaks to a larger issue of civic illiteracy, where people are not aware of the responsibilities of citizenship. They're ignorant of the way that our system of representative self-government is supposed to function. And left, right, and center, I think that we should all be very deeply alarmed about that.
Yeah, I was, again, I thought it was going to be 25. Now, then I thought about it. By about 3 points, more Republicans voted to Democrats, but then I thought, well, wait a minute. Senator Casey didn't have an opponent in the primary. Governor Wolf didn't have an opponent. And we did have the gubernatorial primary, Gene, going on.
You did, and you had but everyone assumed that there was going to be this heightened awareness and engagement. And Dave is right. What we really do need, and we talk about it, people say we need civic engagement. I would go further. I would say we need civil, informed engagement. We need people aware of the issues. We need people engaged in a civil manner. And unfortunately, we're losing so much of that. But I think everybody was surprised at the low turnout, because this was supposed to be a big year where everything was heightened and the activity and the enthusiasm were at high levels, and we didn't see it here in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I agree. Final comment on it? I mean,
no, it's especially disappointing because of the upheaval with the Democrat Supreme Court imposed a gerrymander that we had so many different candidates running for the newly reconfigured congressional seats that I thought that in particular would drive voter interest and turnout. It just
we expect a decision by the U.S. Supreme Court by the end of June on gerrymandering, whether it's constitutional.
Correct.
We have a case involving the state legislature that the Republicans did in Wisconsin. Then we have a Democratic gerrymander in Maryland on a congressional district. Well, look, we didn't get to the business. We'll have you back next month and we'll do business. All right. I'll tell you what. Sports betting is coming our way. We're going to talk to a gentleman who's involved in, I guess, implementing the regulations that will, determine exactly what the state law means and how it all gets implemented. And we'll do that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties, representing the faculty and coaches who are devoted to providing quality public higher education for Pennsylvania's college students.
Well, I'm sure you're aware that we have a sports betting now is going to be underway as soon as the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board does the regulations. And sitting across from me is a guy in the know, Doug Harbach. He's the communications director with the Pennsylvania Gaming Board. And I'll tell you, Doug, I read the reports that came out, and I'm a little confused about this. It's complicated, as someone once said in a film. So let's give us the grand overview. What's the major takeaway from the expansion of sports betting that the folks might be interested in?
Okay, Terry, and thanks for having me today. The U.S. Supreme Court, of course, overturned what was called the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act. It was actually a law that was proposed and passed by Senator Bill Bradley, the ex-basketball player.
Oh, yeah.
And that was overturned in the court by a New Jersey case. And in a nutshell, it now allows states to go ahead and look at setting up sports wagering. In Pennsylvania, we are fortunate that the legislature got ahead of this. In the gaming expansion bill last year, they did put this in with 5 other types of gaming expansion to allow us to move ahead with it as quickly as possible. Bottom line is we are currently working on regulations, because our job at the Gaming Control Board, it's been this way with the casinos, it'll be this way with the other types of gaming expansion, is to protect the public.
Right.
So we can't unleash a game like sports wagering until we have the regulations right.
All right, I want to talk about the, we'll get to some of the other ones, but first, what does it mean when you say sports betting? What are Jane and Joe, what are we all going to be, not that I'm going to do it, but what are people going to be able to bet on? How are they going to be able to do that?
Well, the law allows that both professional and amateur sports. So we're really talking about professional and college sports, and the things that you're reading the newspapers and you see, which are the NFL games, the NCAA games,
and Penn
those
State
type of
football?
Thing. Penn State football, unless there's a moratorium about state not wagering within states. Some states are considering not allowing you to wager on college games that are within their state. But in a bottom line, they'll be able to do that. It also actually gives a provision for auto racing.
Auto racing.
Auto racing. But,
horse racing?
Well, horse racing's already out there.
That's
betting.
true.
That's right.
True.
But the one thing that is not allowed under the law is high school betting. You're not going to see us be going to high schools.
Local high schools, no betting. So, in other words, you'll be able to sit in your home, get on your computer or this little thing right here, this phone, and make a wager. Is that basically where we are with this?
Eventually. What you'll see at the beginning is the casinos will petition to us. They're the ones that get to own these licenses for sports betting, to set up a sports book. Likely that will be within their facilities, and they will pay $10 million each for that certification. So this is also a significant moneymaker for the Commonwealth before we even start the actual sports betting. And then the provision in the law is that this wagering can happen on the internet. So you will
say that again.
The wagering can also happen on the internet.
I want to make sure people understand that.
Right. Yeah. So there is a provision that will allow then the casinos to offer basically another form of iGaming in the form of sports wagering.
All right, I want to run to a break. I want to also get into this controversy over the tax, the 36% tax, which is, I think you'll correct me, the highest in the nation, and it's very controversial. The taxpayers might like it because, it's money that will go into into the state coffers. We'll get to that and some other aspects of gaming in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care.
I'm chatting with Doug Harbach. He's the communications director with the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board, and we're chatting about something that's coming our way, sports betting. It's professional and amateur sports. We're talking about college sports as well, correct? Mm-hmm. Not high school or middle school sports. So the bottom line here is this is going to come. You'll be able to do this literally sitting in your living room or wherever, your kitchen, wherever, with a computer and over the internet and betting. Is this going to be, do you anticipate a big expansion of of betting because of the ease with which and the expansion into so many areas? What's your sense?
Well, you know, we set up a market, meaning Pennsylvania and its legislature, set up a market of what I would call convenience for its casinos. And this is very similar. And that's been wildly successful for Pennsylvania. We're pulling in $1.4 billion a year in tax revenue from the casinos. Similarly, this will be a convenience. Remember, one of the other things that's going on in the gaming expansion is what they call iGaming. So where they're going to bring casino games, anything from roulette and poker and slot machines, also to your tablet and iPhone in the near future. We're working on those regulations, so that will be rolled out, and we'll be the 4th state to offer that. Yeah. Both of those, I think, the sports wagering and the iGaming will be significant tax.
I have to stop you. I have to interject right here. What about addiction? I mean, you know, that can be a very serious problem. Wreck homes, wreck families.
Absolutely. When you make this easy, and we pay attention to this at the board all the time, we even have a list they call the self-exclusion list at casinos where people can ban themselves from going into casinos. We have thousands of people who have done that. When you have this convenience market for all these forms of gambling, you have to expect that. 2 things. One, in a lot of these internet gaming, there will be limits on your spend that you can place. There will be a self-exclusion option for them to stay off of these games. And then also some of the revenue coming in will go toward problem gambling programs to help individuals. So the state's trying to get ahead of this, knowing that there is this area that will probably heighten itself as far as problem gambling.
All right, one of the controversies has to do with the number 36. 36%, that's the, our state, according to what I've read, will have the highest tax rate in the nation. It's unfair for me to ask you if that's a fair tax, but how controversial is that, and what does it mean?
Well, I think it's controversial on the end of the casinos because they're going to pay, you know, a significant amount of money. Some of the other states are proposing lower amounts. When you compare that, and plus the $10 million they're paying up front, I understand that, you know, they're in business. They want to pay as little taxes, just as you and I want to pay as little taxes as we can. But at the same time, we set a 55% tax originally on slot machines, the highest in the nation, you know, right up there. And then they were lined up to get into Pennsylvania to set up casinos. So I think this will not hinder them from going forward, and it really won't affect the player. The player really will not see any difference whether they would be in Pennsylvania wagering or in Vegas wagering or New Jersey.
By difference, you mean the payouts? That
the payouts. The odds are going to be set. You know, these casinos are going to partner up with other firms that are going to set the lines and so forth, and you know, so those things are going to be likely similar across the country as usual.
Well, we're out of time, but the one thing I want to ask you is you're going to do some regulations in the next week or so, and at least to start, and you'll come back in. Hopefully we'll get you back in and you can talk about it. And there are other aspects of gaming expansion that I think our viewers would be interested in. All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well.